Welcome to this episode of the Legal Paige Podcast. Today is all about quarterly planning and how to prepare for quarter one and every quarter for that matter the right way. I am overjoyed to have my good friend Hope Taylor on the podcast with us today to really dive into this topic further. So Hope is a senior portrait and wedding photographer serving both Charleston and Savannah. She actually began her business at 16 years old and decided as a senior in high school to pursue her business full-time instead of going to college. And 8 years later, she teaches photographers and small business owners how to grow their business quickly and strategically. And she is doing that now a lot through quarterly planning. So I thought it would be great to have an expert on the podcast for her and I to kind of go back and forth and talk with you guys all about our quarterly planning strategies and honestly, our yearly planning strategies as you head into 2022. So without further ado, let's get into this, Legal Pagers. You're listening to the Legal Paige Podcast, where we chat about life and business with a legal twist. I'm Paige, attorney and photographer helping online businesses and creatives tackle their business dreams without breaking out in hives. No more legal mumbo jumbo. This podcast features simple, bite-sized advice that'll have you legally legit in no time. Are you ready? Let's get started. Friends, thanks for listening to today's podcast. I am so excited to have Hope Taylor here to talk all about quarterly planning, how to get organized, prepared, what tools you really need for all of the things, and her best tips on how to approach Q1 and what you need to do. So welcome to the podcast, Hope.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am too. You are always just a bundle of joy and happiness, and I know you pretty darn well, but I would love for you to give our listeners a little insight into who you are and what led you to where you're at now.
Well, you are very sweet. So yeah, the Cliff Notes version is I actually began my business when I was a 16-year-old high school student. So I was a junior in high school when I picked up photography as kind of a little side hobby. And fast forward to my senior year, I was working on my business full time and going to high school part time. I had enough credits that I didn't have to go for full school days. So then I was applying to colleges, growing my business simultaneously. And when I graduated, I had committed to a university, but decided to revoke my admission a few weeks before moving in to take my business full time. So that was 8 years ago. And I am a wedding and senior portrait photographer still, but I also educate other photographers and business owners on how to build businesses that allow them to just have a lot of work-life balance, but are also really strategic and profitable. So I have online courses, I do coaching, I do all the things, and I absolutely love it. It's really cool to go from a high school student who has no idea what she's doing to helping other photographers pursue their dreams. It's a really fun little journey.
Yeah, you have so many good educational resources out there. And one of my favorites recently is your YouTube channel. So everyone just go watch Hope's YouTube channel. It's so good. And that's actually where we came up with this idea is she put out a video about quarterly planning. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect because we always have the TLP community kind of like thinking more business strategy wise by the end of the year. And, you know, they've kind of, they're getting all their taxes in a row and all their legal stuff in a row. And then people are thinking about kind of business strategy in terms of, you know, education and what they need to do. But I think honestly, some people just have a really hard time just sitting down and figuring out like, what should the first quarter of my year look like? And that's why I wanted to have you on the podcast. So I'm so excited that you're here to talk about it. And I think we should just get right into quarterly planning because I do it, but I feel like I change it up all the time and I'm not an expert in quarterly planning. So I really wanted to have you here. What are like your first big tips for entrepreneurs as they sit down at the end of the year and they kind of look at their first quarter of the upcoming year? Like, what are those very first things they need to do in order to really make planning it effective?
Yeah. So this is actually so funny that you asked me to speak on quarterly planning because I do not consider myself a type A person at all. And I actually do the same thing as you were. Like for the last few years, I've really switched it up each year and kind of changed up how I approach it until 2 years ago. And I started using these very specific quarterly calendars that I love. And it has really changed the game for me to see a more big picture vision of my business and allow for me to see at just a big overview glance at what the years and the quarters are going to look like. And it's really allowed for more work-life balance for me, which has been such a gift. So at the beginning of every year, this is going to be not as practical, but it's going to be encouragement somebody needs to hear. You don't have to be on top of your game and doing quarterly planning for the next year in December or January. I'm pretty sure I did my quarterly planning for the first quarter of this year in like mid-February. And so just anybody listening that's like listening to this in January and they're like, oh, I missed it. I'm too late. Like I can't do quarterly planning for Q1 anymore. That's just not true. Whenever you start is fine. Whenever you have a chance to actually sit down and plan is the right time to plan. It doesn't have to be in December or January. So that's my first tip is just let it happen when you have time for it to happen. Don't feel like if you miss January 1, you can't do this in your business because it's just as useful no matter when you start. But when I'm looking at Q1, when I'm specifically looking at the beginning of a new year, I do something a little bit differently than when I'm looking at Q2, Q3, Q4. And that is that I look at my year overhaul. I look at the full year before I actually look at Q1 specifically. And the reason that I do that is I want to map out the projects that I already have booked. Since I'm a wedding photographer, I'm traveling pretty frequently for out-of-town weddings, for out-of-town engagement sessions, for speaking engagements, and things that are booked a year to a year and a half, sometimes 2 years in advance. And so I like to look at my year at a glance and put all of my already booked projects on a big yearly calendar to get a visual of like, okay, Q1 does have margin for me to do a new project. So I'm going to really hone in on a new project in Q1. Or Q1 is actually packed with travel, but Q2 has the margin for a new project. So we're going to look at Q2 for that. And it just kind of gives me a big picture vision on where I have the margin to actually fit in new things instead of trying to fit in new things first and then realizing later, like I squeezed that into a season that was already way too busy.
Yeah, that's so helpful, honestly, for people to just get started because the looking big picture from a bird's eye view is really important. We get so bogged down as creatives in particular because we want to start new projects and we want to do new things. I am literally raising my hand high here. Like I fall prey to this all the time where something will pop in my inbox and I'm like, oh yeah, I can create that template contract, no problem. And then my team has to be like, you have absolutely no time, Paige. I don't know what you're talking about. Right, so exactly. Like actually being like, okay, this is my season of being able to launch X new project, or this is my season of a couple of weeks. I don't have a lot of travel on my calendar. I actually can sit down and like work on my back end workflow or something along those lines. So I love that. And I love the big calendars. We'll talk about those in a second because I'm sure people want to know like, where are they? What do they look like? But one thing that you mentioned was work-home life balance. And just to kind of like set the record straight for people, I mean, I think it's like work-life home integration kind of, you know, like they kind of flow together as entrepreneurs. But you are recently engaged. You're building a new home. You just moved. You're still shooting weddings and senior portraits all the time. You're constantly spending time with friends and family. And I'm sure a bunch more. Like you guys, if you go watch her on social media, I'm like, oh my gosh, Hope is doing all the things all the time. But how has quarterly planning then really helped you? Or I don't know if you have a team, like has it also helped your team as well be able to like help plan for you since you are kind of in this like new busy season? And I think everyone right now really in the wedding industry and photography industry in particular is in like this, you know, season of like burnout, honestly, quite frequently. And then you add all these other like personal factors in. And I just think if people are looking at 2022 from a different perspective of planning, it might really help them. So I'd love your take on that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I have 80,000 things happening on any given day right now. It is kind of insane. And I do have a team that helps. So I have a VA and I have an integrator and some members of my team that help with this. And quarterly planning has been huge in helping me see the big picture of what I just talked about, which is my work at a glance for the year. But I'm probably going to talk about this a ton during this interview. The very first thing that I actually put on my quarterly calendars when I moved from looking at a full year to actually looking at specific quarters, when I'm looking at Q1 or any quarter, the very first thing I'm putting on that calendar is my personal life stuff. So before I even look at my booked shoots, my booked weddings, my booked projects, for specific quarters, I look at my family's birthdays. I look at Hayden and I's anniversary. I look at friends coming into town. I look at any personal trips, things that I have on my calendar that I know are non-negotiables for me. Because like you said earlier, I think that balance, work-life balance is like a buzz term that is just not real. It's like a unicorn that just doesn't exist. I think that it's about seasons of busyness and then seasons of like you said, it's just, it's working it together and trying to integrate those two things together. And I believe it comes in seasons. There's seasons of busy and there's seasons of slow and there's seasons of personal life. And then there's seasons of work. And seeing that visually from a bird's eye view on these calendars really helps me to look at it and say, okay, I have Hayden's birthday this week, so I need to have the majority of my work done at the beginning of the week. So then the second half of the week, I can focus on that. And if it's just in my iPhone calendar, I'll wake up Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday and forget that his birthday was on a Friday until Friday. And then I've totally messed up that entire week. So from a work-life balance perspective, it really helps to map out what your personal commitments are first. And I am very aggressive with this. Like, I don't just put like my family's beach vacation on there. Like I said, it's birthdays, it's anniversaries, it's my girlfriend is passing through town and I want to make sure there's time on my calendar for drinks with her. It's any little personal life thing that I don't want to miss out on. It's the first thing that goes on my quarterly calendar and everything else functions around. I do it in pink. So everything else functions around those pink sticky notes on my calendar that stand for all of the non-negotiable personal life things.
I have the biggest smile on my face right now as you just went through that, because so many people put their personal life secondary to their business. And that is, I would say, if you guys take anything away from this episode, that little nugget that Hope just said is so vital moving forward, especially for just mental health and like your own sanity. And I've seen way too many people just honestly, since, the pandemic happened as well, it's just a different world. It's a different vibe. We're all so used to like Zoom fatigue, and we're used to doing things on our computer. We're used to seeing things on our phone. And like you said, making the time and putting that first, like that is your first priority, as it should be, you guys, for everyone. My business is definitely a priority of mine, but where would my business be without my friends and my family and my support system and then my mental health? Right. It wouldn't be where it is. And so, Hope, I love that. It's like when you're looking at so first you do like, where am I traveling to? What are my absolute commitments here, full calendar wise? And then you zone it in for just the quarter, because then you've got some sticky notes on there that are like, well, I have to go do this. Like it's already booked for my business. And then you put your personal stuff on there, which I love. And I think for people to hear too, like I am going to make time for my friend just passing through, because that's what's going to bite you in the bud later on is by Q2 and Q3, you're going to be like, I've missed out on all these opportunities because I'm busy, quote unquote. Right. And my calendar doesn't allow for it because you didn't plan appropriately. So I love that. Love, love, love. Okay. So we're kind of at this workflow stage of you've put your like pink sticky notes on your calendar, at least planned it out. I mean, some people may not want like a visual. They might want to put it on Google like calendar or whatever. I never have felt that that's actually super helpful. But then what do you do in terms of how you start scheduling other things like collaborations and projects and things that you like team meetings, stuff like that?
Yeah. So when I'm looking at a quarterly calendar specifically, so I have, and I'm going to give you guys a link to a YouTube video where I show the visuals of this. So that'll be in the show notes. If you're a visual person and you want to watch as I'm talking about this, that will be there for you. But these quarterly calendars have just the 3 months in the quarter on them. So I'm literally only looking at one quarter of my calendar at a time, just for my visual friends. So when I'm looking at Q1, I've put all my personal life things on there. And then I actually, since now we're looking at a different calendar than the yearly one, I actually put personal first, and then I go in and I remark all of those non-negotiable things that I have booked in my calendar on the quarter. So then I put the weddings, I put the shoots, I put the travel, I put just all the things that are work related that are already in my calendar. Those go next. So that's step 2. Step 3 is then what you were talking about, where I start to visualize the collaborations and the launches and the free challenges and the webinars and the kind of digital marketing side of my business comes last. Because what I see a lot of people doing that are trying to scale into the digital marketing world or the course world or the passive income world is they say, okay, I want to launch a course in March, and I'm going to do everything I need to do before March to make sure that course is launched. But they say that and they set that goal for themselves without looking at the bird's eye view of their calendar in January and February. And in January and February, they're in 3 different states for 3 different conferences and 2 different weddings and all over the place. And they don't work their digital marketing calendar around their existing calendar. They try to just mesh it all together. And then they are so burnt out and overwhelmed that nothing gets done to 100% of their ability, right? Because they're just drowning in their workload. And so the reason that I do my digital marketing side of my business as step 3 is because I want that to work into my existing calendar, and I don't want my entire life to function around that. I want it to be vice versa, right? So I need to make sure that I have a bird's eye view of what my commitments and calendar looks like before I try to add any of that stuff in. So now I'm looking at my quarterly calendar. I can see, okay, this week I have a birthday, an anniversary, and a wedding that weekend. I'm not doing anything the week before or after that because I'm going to be freaking tired. And so then I'm going to start looking at the week after that. And I'm like, okay, I have this 2-week span where I only have 1 or 2 shoots. Let's fit in some type of launch or webinar or collaboration in that 2-week span, because then I can visualize it and protect that 2 weeks and not add additional stuff on top of that. So step 3 is I'm outlining all of the digital marketing side of my business. And that is where all of the kind of fun launch related stuff fits in.
And do you do that like quarterly, or like for our business, we have to look at kind of the launches and some of the digital marketing strategy on a year perspective.
Yeah.
And I wonder if it would be helpful for people, like you said, I mean, if you are already putting in all of your non-negotiables and then all of your work related engagements that are absolutes that you have to do, and you look at Q1 and just honestly, new things aren't going to fit in, digital marketing strategy, any new sales or launches, like lots of that stuff probably won't fit into your business. Then would you suggest people kind of go back to like looking at the full year? So when you're doing Q1, is it like you're in Q1, but then you're also looking at the full year?
Yes. So that's exactly what it is. When I'm doing Q1, I am literally have both of the calendars in front of me where I'm referencing the year calendar to my left and then marking up the Q1 calendar on my right. So I can see, okay, I know that I have the whole month of September is really, really slow. So in my mind, in my business, there's 2 kind of types of launches. There's a new launch for a brand new product, which requires way more lead time, way more just work in general. And then there's kind of the rinse and repeat launches that we do pretty regularly that don't require as much lead time. So for me, the rinse and repeat types of launches that are webinars I've already run or just reopening enrollment to an existing product, I don't put those on my yearly calendar because those are something that my team can pretty much execute without me. And this calendar is pretty much just for me from a time commitment perspective. But if it's a new launch for a new product that requires a lot of my time and a lot of lead up for launching, that goes on the yearly calendar so I can visualize exactly where that fits in so that I know not to overbook myself for the weeks leading up to it.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. Keep
okay,
going.
Good. Glad that makes sense. That's kind of my thought process is the quarterly calendars get to see the rinse and repeat type of launches that my team executes. The yearly calendar is where I see all of the new launches that I'm really actively involved in.
Perfect. Okay. So say you're like at this point with your quarterly calendar and you're kind of starting to look at, okay, what can I do in Q1 now that I have all these things on my calendar? What do you suggest for people in terms of like maybe one or two things they can start really picturing, strategizing to implement into Q1? Because you have to do that beforehand. You can't just honestly, you can think of it day of, to be very frank with you, and you can try to start working on it. But if you're being really good about planning and strategizing, I think it's good to not put too much into Q1, especially because the beginning of the year, in my opinion, is weird for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, it is.
It's like we're coming out of busy season for a lot of people, and then you're like into the holidays. And I feel like January doesn't really start until like mid-January, end of January. Like some people just, they need that extra time to honestly just rest and recoup. So what would be like your things you would tell people, like put one or two of these things in Q1 if time allows?
Yeah, this is a great question. So Q1 is a little unique for me because I completely agree with you. It's my slower season. I've intentionally not booked a lot of weddings or a lot of work because I want it to be my downtime as a photographer. Specifically, this is like our slow time, and I want to soak that up and take advantage of that. And so typically Q1 for me isn't anything new. I am typically not doing one of those new launches that I just talked about where I'm like, let's release a brand new product and spend the entire Q1 just like hitting the ground running with a brand new offer. I'm not going to do that to myself. So Q1 is almost always me going back to the previous year and refreshing and changing and just getting kind of an update across my entire business. So then in Q2, I can hit the ground running with what might be a new project. So typically things on my calendar in Q1 are things like re-edit your entire wedding photography client experience from a visuals perspective. So upgrade your bridal guide, update your pricing guide, update your portfolio on your website, things like that, where I'm going into something that's existing. It doesn't take a ton of my time, but it just needs a little bit of a facelift before I move into Q2 and starting something brand new. I don't like to have one foot in multiple buckets. And so I'm going to get all of the refreshing done before Q1, before I start anything new or big in Q2. So anything existing in your business that just needs a little bit of a facelift, a little bit of a refresh is an awesome thing to squeeze into Q1.
Absolutely. And I will add in here too, for people that are like, you want to do something in Q1, like Hope says, I think we all have the best of intentions. We want to start the year off like, rah, we can do it. It's going to be great. And we're going to have so much motivation. At the end of the day, like, no, you might not. And that's okay. And I think Hope and I are both trying to like give you guys permission and empower you here to be like, it's all right to take a little time off in January. Yeah. And I honestly think it's really important to. And Hope is saying like, just do like these little small things that'll be an uplift and really help in certain aspects of your business and make you feel like you are accomplished and you are getting things done. And then I would add in here too, if you're listening to this, it's the end of the year or whatever, you're in the middle of January and you're listening to this and you're still thinking about Q1, plan out some just brainstorming days for yourself, because that is something you can put on your calendar. And I don't think we actually strategize a brainstorming day while, we just kind of do it like nonchalantly every day and all day. But it's not like we're writing things down and we're thinking about how long it's going to take and what we need to outsource for that project and, like what every single step that would be to make that come to fruition. That's what a brainstorming day is for. And my team and I have just put those on the calendar. Like we have team meetings that are just strategizing team meetings. So I would suggest that as well. Let's talk here. I think this is a good place to also talk about batching, because there's things that you content-wise, you probably want to get done in your business, whether that's writing and creating blogs, whether that's strategizing for a social media like plan for 2 to 4 weeks, whether that's, taking actual brand photos and videos and reels and those type of things. So we batch all of those here at the Legal Paige. And we block out days again. So they're kind of like when we're looking at a quarterly calendar, we don't have those on the big, yearly calendar, but we make sure, okay, this morning of this day of every single month is batching podcast or batching reels.
Yeah.
And what do you suggest for batching purposes for people if they're struggling to kind of just like get a bunch of content done?
Yeah. So the biggest thing I batch in my business is my YouTube videos, which I actually don't know that I talk about enough because I love batching. If I can sit down one day and get an entire quarter of something done, that is like the best thing that I could do for myself and my work-life balance is just get it all done ahead of time. So we batch film my YouTube videos once a quarter. So I actually fly my videographer out. He lives in a different state. Fly him out and we have 48 hours where we crank out anywhere from 12 to 16 YouTube videos in 2 days. And we bulk film all of them and then bulk schedule all of them. So all of the videos and the coordinating emails, blog posts, Facebook posts, social media posts, etc., are all bulk done at the same time once a quarter. So that is definitely a huge thing that I'm marking off each quarter on my calendar is when is Josh flying in? When are we filming? What are we filming? And when is it all going to be completed and scheduled by? And what members of my team need to be doing all of those different tasks. So that's the biggest thing that we bulk that has been a game changer for us. And just marking off those filming dates ahead of time is so smart to do in Q1. Because then you can know exactly when you need to be prepared for each filming date.
Yeah, I love that. I used to do this with YouTube as well. So I used to have a YouTube channel. I think we're going to like ramp it back up in 2022. Ooh. I've just been pregnant this year. So I was like, I think like one content pillar needs to like maybe take a back seat right now. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to feel on the video for this entire pregnancy. But we did the exact same thing you did. We flew in my videographer. We batch recorded all the YouTubes. YouTube in particular is like a massive beast to embark on. Yeah. And so having someone that can come and batch for you so you can get quarters done at a time. So you'd probably put that in your calendar, obviously on a big calendar, like big yearly calendar as well. Like these are the 2 days each quarter my videographer's coming in. And then for I just want to put in here, like I do podcasts and then a lot of people are just doing content pillars like blogs and social media posting. Mm-hmm. And the one tip I have for people here is don't try to batch record those quarterly. Mm-hmm. I think you need at least 3 to 4 separate batch days in a quarter for those. And here's why. Because social media changes so quickly. And we have learned, like we've tried to batch reels on our calendar and like stick a date on our calendar for just a whole quarter. And by the time those reels like come about in 2 to 3 months, or we want to post that, idea that we had planned out, 2 to 3 months down the road, the algorithm has changed. Social media has changed. There's new hot trends. It's just not going to do as well, to be very frank with you. Mm-hmm. And so we have learned like batching too far in advance for some things can actually be detrimental in your business. So just be aware of that as well, you guys. I would say, like if you're just looking at quarter 1 and quarter 2, try to do it at least once a month. And for us, we actually batch twice a month, which seems a little crazy. But like Hope said, it's still, I am only doing that on that day. And then I have still the rest of the week. So even if I'm batching once every 2 weeks for all my reels and all my social media content, because we like to keep photos fresh and with the seasons and with the colors, and like we kind of change that vibe on social media. And then also, like stories and everything. We try to obviously integrate it with my personal life too, because we don't want posts to not have to do with what I'm talking about in stories. So we do it every 2 weeks. And while it seems like a lot, and at first I looked at my calendar and I was like, oh my gosh, I have 1 day every 2 weeks that I'm just doing stuff for social media, but it works because then I'm not thinking about it those other 13 days. I'm only thinking about it on the one. And that was a game changer for me to be like, oh, I have to do it only quarterly and I have to get it so far in advance because so many people have told me to do this with quarterly planning. And I just wanted to put in here like, it might not necessarily be true. And you can still put multiple days on your quarterly calendar to batch record.
Oh, absolutely. And I actually don't batch I don't batch my social media content. And I'm obviously not doing podcasts and things like that. So I completely agree with you that if I were doing that, it would need to be a little bit more relevant and like true to the time that it was being shared. But one of the other things I do is this is more of a weekly basis than a quarterly planning basis. But I know that every single Monday is my content creation days for the week. So that is when I like pump out all of my blog posts for the week that are related to my actual photography work. And that is when I spend time scheduling the YouTube videos that Josh is editing and sending back to me. And that type of thing. So having a day each week that you touch on those things, like you were saying, once every 2 weeks, is also really beneficial from a batching perspective to know that one day a week is dedicated to keeping up with that side of things. Because then again, you only think about it once a week instead of trying to fit it into every single day, and you're a little bit more productive across the board.
Ooh, I love that. A content day, you guys. I love that idea. And just doing it on one day a week. And then for many of you who are probably like, you might not have a YouTube channel and a podcast and, you're pushing out a bunch of like blog content. Hope and I are at that point now, but some of you aren't. And I would say that content day would be a great day for you to schedule in guest podcast episodes, or can you collaborate with someone content-wise on that day while, of course, getting out your photography blogs or your videography blogs or posting whatever you need to post, planning out the week on, Planoly or later social media apps kind of thing. I love that idea on just one day, because the trap that I see lots of solopreneurs getting into is they're like, oh yeah, I have an extra 2 hours that day on my calendar, but getting in and out of projects really, it obviously reduces your time, and it's hard because you're never 150% in on that project because you're constantly getting in and out of it. So yeah, I always tell people even batching days, like content wise, that Hope just said, is amazing. Okay, let's go back to your YouTube video. We're of course going to link it in the show notes. We're going to talk like we've tried to visualize for you guys here in Word format what this quarterly planning looks like. You said massive calendars, and I love them. Where did you get them? How did you print them? For anyone who hasn't watched that amazing tutorial on planning, they need to know all about these puppies. So tell them all the things.
Yes. So these calendars are a friend of mine, Kat Schmoyer, actually is who creates them. She sells them in her online shop. And they are, first of all, beautiful. You can pick your colors, and I'm super girly and love the pastel colors that she has, but you can also get them in black and white for my not pastel friends. But they are gorgeous. And so you just buy the template. I think it's under $20. I mean, they're very affordable. And then you can reprint them as many times as you want to. So what I do is I order them online at Staples, and I print them as a blueprint because it's much cheaper than printing it on like a poster or on something that's a thicker material. So I just get them printed on blueprint paper. I've heard some people say if you call and try to do it that way, they tell you they can't print it on a blueprint, because I think blueprints are supposed to be for blueprints. And so you're cheating the system a little bit, getting it for cheaper. But if you ordered online, I haven't had any issues, and I just go pick them up and hang them up on my wall and work on them that way. And they're life size, which makes it so nice because you can use the little mini sticky notes to fill in each day. And that allows me to like write on things and peel them off and put them back on and really just scratch them up while I'm doing my quarterly planning.
Why do you use sticky notes too? Because when I tried this, I did it, I don't know, I think it was 2 years ago. I like printed a calendar and I was like trying to follow someone's tutorial. I think if I did this your way, it would be a lot more successful. So maybe I'll try that this year. But they like told me to kind of put it on like in a frame that was like $15 or something. And then I could white erase marker like different colors and stuff on the frame, because it was kind of plexiglass over the actual calendar. I didn't love that idea, and it didn't totally work for me. I'd love your perspective on why sticky notes kind of work a little bit better for you.
Yeah, so I actually just bought the calendar on a whiteboard and I haven't used it because I like something about just the feeling of working like paper and pen and sticky notes on these feels more exciting to me. And then I can hang up Q1 next to Q2 when I get Q2 done and visualize them all next to each other versus having to completely erase one to do the next quarter. So that's part of why I love it. The reason I love the sticky notes is because I can write on top of the sticky note. And then if something, because the pandemic makes this happen pretty frequently when I need to move something. So you can write on the sticky notes and just move the entire sticky notes versus having to scratch something out or erase it or mark it up and make it not as aesthetic. So I like to just be able to physically move the sticky notes around. And the different colors represent the different types of work that I'm putting on there. So the pink ones represent my personal commitments. I think I do green for my booked weddings, shoots, and work-related travel. And then I do blue for my launch windows and the digital marketing side of my business. So it's really easy for me to just glance up from my desk, look at my calendar and say, okay, this is going to be a digital marketing week. Or like, oh, this is about to be a travel week. Let me start packing. Like I can just really quickly look up at the calendar and see based on the colors what my months are going to look like and what my weeks are going to look like.
And do you ever transfer these obviously like tangible calendars that you have up on your wall, I'm guessing in your office or something, I'd love to know where they're at, to like Google calendars, or do you have it somewhere online so your team can see it, or just so you can get notifications? Like for me, I sometimes have to have it on certain things on my Google calendar, but I'm just wondering how that kind of works going from tangible calendar to digital calendar.
Such a good question. So I have the only thing that goes on those tangible calendars that aren't already in my phone calendar and my Google calendar are the launch windows and the digital marketing side of my business. Really, the overall goal from a very big picture perspective for me is to map all of that out so that I can visualize where the digital marketing things are going to fit in. For me, that's literally why I do these calendars in the first place, is so that I can visualize, okay, I have time this week to do a new project, or heck no, hope you cannot do something in Q3 because you're going to explode if you add one more thing to your workload. It just really helps me to visualize. So all of the already booked shoots, all of the personal stuff, that's already in my phone. I just naturally put all of that in my phone already. But though the calendar process allows me to then visualize my launch windows, finalize where everything's going to go, and then I add all of that into my Google Calendar based off of the work I've done on the quarterly calendars. So then my phone calendar syncs with Google, syncs with Honeybook, syncs with my whole life. And that's the calendar that we then all reference online.
Makes total sense. And okay, so you said in this podcast episode, you just started kind of quarterly planning workflows in 2021. This is probably a good question to end on, because for people, it's like, when do you do this? Like what made you decide like, no, now is the time I have to implement this type of like workflow and strategy and quarterly planning into my business? And when do you think people should do it? Or if like, what is that aha moment or feeling that they should have at that point in time?
Yeah, I honestly think that there is not a single person that couldn't benefit from doing this. I do wish that I had started doing it sooner. The reason that I got to the point that I wanted to start doing it is that I had so many different moving pieces and income streams in my business that things started to slip through the cracks. And I knew that I was losing out on a lot of money, if I'm being just super candid, because I was waking up one morning and being like, Hope, you just had 2 really slow weeks. Why did you not capitalize on that and do something related to a collaboration? Or like, why did you not fit a webinar in there? Why did you not do XYZ? And I would wake up and try to shotgun those things and turn them around in like 48 hours when I woke up one day and realized I had the time to do it. And it was just exhausting. My brain just wasn't turning off because I was constantly trying to just wait to jump at the exact moment that I ended up feeling like I had the capacity to do something new. And I just wanted to be able to visualize that way ahead of time so that I could just rest easy at night knowing that I'm not missing out on chunks of my calendar that I should be capitalizing on from a free time perspective. So I think that the biggest question you should ask yourself is there anything falling through the cracks right now? Do I feel like there is a moving piece of things that is not very clearly laid out in my mind about what the next step should be and how I can outline things and how I can capitalize on my free time? Do I feel like there's something slipping through or an opportunity I missed because I wasn't planning ahead? And if the answer is yes, which I would guess it is for most people, then I think you'd really benefit from getting a visual from a bird's eye view like this.
So helpful. And I'm glad at the end of this episode, we kind of brought it back to ROI in terms of, you shouldn't just be doing things willy-nilly throughout the year, thinking like it's going to work or your business is going to like somehow expand and grow and flourish because of it. You have to strategize the money-making parts of your business, to be very frank. And if you, like Hope said, if you're like, oh, things are falling through the cracks, or, oh, I missed the opportunity to make X amount of money in this season. And honestly, look at your financials too when you're quarterly planning. If I can squeeze that in here in this episode, because if you're like, okay, this quarter and this quarter, I do really well, but these other quarters, it would be nice if I had a couple extra $1,000 here or there. Like, think about how then you can filtrate like actual ROI into that season.
Absolutely.
Because for me, everything I do is always attached to like, what's my CTA? And then where am I leading people? And then is there an ROI on it? And if there isn't, I usually don't do it, you guys, because my business is like, I have employees, like I gotta make money in this business to keep the business alive. And so that's really important to me too. And I think that's a good, well-rounded part of this episode here, to be like, yeah, it's great to batch record and, like plan out certain things and of course put in your personal life. But at the end of the day as well, remember, this is your business calendar and you need to put in days that are going to bring you money, or at least the project is.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So true. I'm so glad that we ended on that note, because we've talked a lot about personal life balance, but I know that you and I both are very passionate about every second of our time spent needs to affect our bottom line, or else we need to readjust how we're spending our time. And so I'm so glad that's the note we ended on, because I think we both feel just as passionately about how important that is.
Yeah. I mean, you run a business to make money. And at the end of the day, I always want people to go back to that. And if you're putting something in your quarterly planning that isn't going to make you money, I want you to take it out and try again. Like 100%. Choose a different sticky note.
Yep. Love it.
Okay. Well, you guys, I loved having Hope here. Before we completely wrap up, Hope, I always love to do like a rapid fire question with our guests, because I think it's kind of funny. And people get to know you more. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
What's your favorite bevy of choice right now?
A pumpkin spice chai latte from Starbucks is my fall drink of choice always.
Yummy. What is like a new TV show you've been binging online?
Shark Tank.
Ooh.
Love it. Shark Tank, always.
It's very business heavy. I love it.
It really is.
What was the highlight of 2021 for you?
Getting engaged, which I feel like is everybody knew that's what I was going to say, but I got engaged in May, and that's easily the best thing.
Yeah, you guys, it's the best. You literally have to go look at all of her blog posts. It's so good. Everyone was like, Hope's whole life is like, finally, it's like, like the blog. And she was like so awesome to share it all with all of us as well. So it was fun to follow your journey for sure.
Oh, thanks.
What is like a funny thing that has happened to you recently?
I got locked out of my apartment last week for 3.5 hours in gray sweatpants with holes in them and no shoes on and nowhere to go.
Oh, yeah, that can be. I'm glad you have a silver lining of thinking that is funny, because some of us would be a little freaked out. The last thing I have for you is, what is currently like your favorite attire of clothing to wear?
Any type of comfortable little matching sweatsuit that makes me look like I have my life together and feels like pajamas.
Perfect. Well, Hope, I know that you have all kinds of things you can point people to if they need more information. Obviously, this YouTube video on quarterly planning will go really hand in hand with what we talked about here today. What other like offerings, freebies do you have for people out there? And then also, if people are loving what you're preaching and would love more insight into like working with you business-wise, business mentorship-wise, what does that look like as well?
Yeah. So my YouTube channel is where I share new content every single week for both photographers and business owners. So that's a great place to get more content from me. My Instagram is where I'm the most active. If you want to see all the life things in addition to the business things, that's Hope Taylor Photography. And then if you want to download a free guide from me, my 5 must-have programs that I just have to have in my business in order to function on a day-to-day. That's a freebie that you guys can download to get all of that info too.
Perfect. Well, thanks again for this podcast episode. I think it was really, really, really informational for everyone. And I appreciate your time coming on.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Legal Paige Podcast. See, I told you being legally legit isn't so scary. Be sure to visit thelegalpaige.com for all show notes. And it would be super awesome if you could head over to iTunes and leave a review. Last but not least, don't forget to join my free Facebook group for unlimited legal and biz Q&A. Chat soon, Legal Pagers.